Land of freedom, toils of the brave, and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave, which have brought results. Kwame, the star of Ghana, Nkrumah, star of Ghana, everybody toils of the brave, and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave, which have brought results. Ghana, we now have freedom. Ghana, land of freedom, everybody toils of the brave, and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave, which have brought results.
Africa Global Radio, we make your day special.
Hello, my name is Chief Moomin, poet and playwright. Keep listening to Africa Global Radio.
Africa Global Radio, our story, our growth, our future.
It must have been a cold winter season in November 1947 in Liverpool, Great Britain, when a 38-year-old Kwame Nkrumah stepped on board the NV Accra, about to sail to the sunny regions of the Gold Coast along the Gulf of Guinea, West Africa.
At long last, the battle has ended. And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever.
On the eve of 7th March 1957, Nkrumah proclaimed the new independent Ghana. The Union Jack was lowered, and the red, gold, green, and black star of the first African country to free itself from British colonial rule was hoisted proudly. The chorus of God Save the Queen gave way to the new anthem, God Bless Our Homeland, Ghana. There was a burst of joy and celebration at the old polo grounds and across the country to herald the new beginning. Within a decade of returning to the Gold Coast, Nkrumah had achieved his vision of self-government now by energizing the nation and organizing the people to deliver on the independence agenda.
And here again, I want to take the opportunity to thank the chiefs and people of this country, the youth, the farmers, the women who have so nobly fought and won this battle. Also, I want to thank the valiant ex-servicemen who have so cooperated with me in this mighty task of freeing our country from foreign rule and imperialism.
Within 2 years of returning to the Gold Coast in 1947 to take up the position of General Secretary of the United Gold Coast Convention, the UGCC, Nkrumah transformed Gold Coast politics. The UGCC was established earlier within the year as the first political party to champion a self-rule agenda. Its leading figures were all busy professionals in law, academia, and business. Pa Grant, Akwa J, J.B. Dankwa, Edward Akufo-Addo, among others. The party needed someone full-time to champion its activities. Enter Nkrumah. Young, energetic, and passionate, he organized mass support for the party and opened up branches across the country for Nkrumah. The people were central to his agenda.
I am depending upon the millions of the country, the chiefs and people, to help me to reshape the destiny of this country. We are prepared to build it up and make it a nation that will be respected by every other nation in the world. We know we are going to have difficult beginnings, but again, I am relying upon your support. I'm relying upon your hard work. Seeing you in these thousands, it doesn't matter how far my eye goes. I can see that you are here in your millions. And my last warning to you is that you ought to stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody.
But Nkrumah would fall out with the UGCC leaders because of his radical approach. In April 1949, he would leave to form his own political party, the Convention's People's Party, the CPP. Within a short while, the CPP would become the dominant player in Gold Coast politics. And within just 2 years of coming into being, the party would win a landslide victory in the first ever elections to be held in the Gold Coast. Nkrumah's majority party in parliament forms a government, and he becomes leader of government business. The first major step towards complete independence later in 1957. Nkrumah was a man in a hurry. He was a man fueled by great passion with an enormous vision and a clear mission.
And as I pointed out, that from now on today, we must change our attitudes, our minds. We must realize that from now on, we are no more a colonial, but a free and independent people. But also, as I pointed out, that also entails hard work. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just minutes ago, I made a point that we are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. It's the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle.
For Nkrumah, it was not just about his new nation, Ghana. It was about Africa.
We have done the battle, and we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it's linked up with total liberation of the African continent.
He liberated the nation, he inspired the continent, he illuminated the people. Nkrumah, the man, the legacy, on Africa Global Radio.
We are not waiting. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. Today, from now on, there is a new African in the world.
Africa Global Radio's Independence Day show as we continue celebrating 1-year anniversary of Africa Global Radio and the 64th anniversary of Ghana's independence. We are here today to have a discussion about the ideas of Kwame Nkrumah, the independence struggle of Ghana, and the relevance of Nkrumah's ideas for today and for the future. We'll also talk a little bit about where we stand, where we think our opinions of where Ghana is today and where maybe we would like it to be or we think it would be, should be at this time in history. So with me today, I have a couple of guests. I should say we have we have the children and grandchildren of Osajifo Kwame Nkrumah here with us today. We have the biological daughter who will be on a little bit later in an audio clip. I consider myself an ideological child of Kwame Nkrumah, and I think maybe we have some ideological grandchildren of Kwame Nkrumah, so we have different generations represented today. So I'll ask each of our guests to maybe give a brief introduction of themselves. I want to welcome you to Africa Global Radio's Independence Day show. First, Namata Saramaga Musisi, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us at AGR Radio. My name is Namata. I am Commander of Creative Arts and Advocacy with the Ghanaian or African Movement, the Economic Fighters League. I also represent the Ugandan People Power Movement as a diaspora coordinator. So I am a Ugandan or an African with roots in Uganda and with my heart in Ghana.
All right, thank you very much, Namata. And next we have Abuaji Bwampong.
Good to be here. My name is Abuaji Bwampong. I am an Nkrumahist. I have been with the All African People's Revolutionary Party for over a decade. I have been part of the Pan-African Student Society, organizing students across the country in Ghana and other parts of the African continent. Raising awareness about the fact that our independence as a people, both on the continent and the diaspora, has been hijacked, and we need to struggle to reclaim that for the advancement of our people.
Okay, thank you very much, and I look forward to having a brief discussion with you today, again, on some of these important topics which we need to really revisit more often than once a year. It should be something that those of us in Africa who have Africa in our hearts revisit on a regular basis and try to figure out how we can make a contribution to moving the agenda and the ideas of Nkrumah forward. Listening to that Independence Day, the poem and the Independence Day speech of Kwame Nkrumah, the speech is really packed with information. He refers to a number of different topics and ideas in that speech. And we know that that speech came at the culmination of the political struggle for independence of Ghana in 1957. And sometimes we are in the process still of discussing that history that led to the independence of Ghana in 1957. And the struggle is an ongoing one, because we know that, as was stated in the previous panel by your previous host, Sister Alba, that history is very important, and we have to learn our history very well. Otherwise, we will make mistakes. We will make the same mistakes, or we'll repeat those mistakes that we've made in the past. And so learning about the history of Ghana is an ongoing battle, because depending on who you talk to, you will get different ideas of what that history is. And it's a very controversial subject. It relates to what we identify as public holidays, what we put in our school curriculum for our children. All of those things affect the way we see ourselves and the way we see our role in changing society or changing the conditions that we're in. So I have a number of topics that I hope that we can each contribute to or discuss as we see fit. First, on the topic of Ghana's independence. It's one that, again, we all know, that we've heard the Independence Day speech numerous times, at least every year, once a year, if not more so. And we know about 1957. We also hear about, there are various traffic circles and monuments to various contributors to Ghana's independence struggle. Sometimes it seems to start, or we're not clear on when it started, but I guess I would suggest that Ghana's independence, we were independent before. It's not like it's something brand new. We were always in it for actually decades, centuries, millennia. Africa was an independent people. It was only at a point in time when we were invaded and others came to dominate us. So we're fighting against reclaim an independence that we previously had. Sometimes I think that's important, because if we think we were only colonized or we were only enslaved, that's our beginning, we won't realize that, no, we had something before. So we won't realize that we are capable of being independent if we think we were always dependent until sometime in the 1950s. So we know, certainly in this part of Africa, there were settlements going back millennia, tens of thousands of years, where Africans were living in this part of the world. Sometimes the formal history of the struggle for self-rule after colonialism came about in the middle of the 17th or 18th century, I believe, with the so-called Fanti Confederation, and then the Aboriginal Protectorate Society,
Aborigines Right Protection Society.
Aborigines Right Protection Society, thank you. And then moving into the 1900s. So all of that is really a very short span compared to the time in which we were independent. But maybe we can talk a little bit about the history that you have learned about independence and where maybe there's some shortfalls or where there's some controversy today about our independence struggle.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Albi. First and foremost, let me pay tribute to those who gave themselves in that struggle. It's a fact that we have always been a free people, and that accident in our history, which came, of course, capitalism came in two forms: enslavement, colonialism, that we suffered, and the fact that the people are oppressed, they will resist to regain their freedom. So let me pay tribute to all those who have always stood on the side of freedom, those who resisted enslavement, those who resisted colonialism, and certainly those who are resisting neo-colonialism today across the African world. If we just look around the turn of the century, when the British decided to satisfy their own aspirations and greed by controlling our resources and our space, you would realize that they came to basically try to rearrange the space we have for their own development. Often our school textbooks make us believe that indeed colonialism in that sphere was to civilize us. I don't know what sort of civilization they were talking about. In fact, one very basic thing that has been key with colonialism is the proliferation of churches. Very interestingly, if you go to the slave dungeon in Cape Coast, on top of the dungeon was a church. It's one of the first Anglican churches in this country. Now, I don't know what sort of god or which god they were serving when they had chained other human beings beneath them. But again, the churches are everywhere, and most of the churches stood with colonialism. This is very important. In the face of our struggle against colonialism, most of the churches stood with colonialism. I'll give you one example. There is a man called Ato Ahoma. Ato Ahoma later became, he was originally called Reverend Richard Samuel Bruce Solomon. Those who are familiar with the Methodist Church in Ghana, he is the founder of what we call Christ's Little Band. He was a journalist and an evangelist as well. He said he did not understand why we sing hymns we don't understand. So at least let's sing songs that we understand in the church. The church had issues with that. Then when the British passed the law, the Crown laws, that if you don't pay your property rate, they will take your land and confiscate it to the Crown, British Crown. He said he thought they came here to preach the word of God. But if it's about land, then they should take their church, we'll take our land. For this reason, this man was excommunicated from the Methodist Church. So we know the role that the church has played as far as this struggle is concerned. And it's very interesting that somebody like Kwame Nkrumah came from that. Nkrumah came from the church. So it is not everybody in the church who supported colonialism, but the church predominantly was on the side of colonialism. As it is today, predominantly, most of the churches are on the side of neo-colonialism. But let's just take a step back. When Nkrumah was invited in 1947 to come to this space, he was not just somebody who just woke up one morning and decided to come and be part of the GCC. Nkrumah, as a student in the United States, had struggled. He had an opportunity to also just go to school, get a job, and mind his own business. But he was always part of the struggle, looking for ways to be able to free his thoughts, his mind, and be able to contribute to the freedom of his people. He himself has said that of all the books he read, one that fired his inspiration most was The Philosophy and Opinion of Marcus Garvey. So you understand what the role Garvey played. You understand the role other Pan-Africanists before Nkrumah played. In fact, when the first Pan-African Congress was held in 1900, Nkrumah himself was some village boy at Nkrofo. He was not even probably born. The second conference in 1919, Nkrumah was just about 10 years. So we don't need messianic beings, or we don't need special beings. We need ordinary Africans who are aware of the circumstances of their people and be able to make contribution. So fast forward, Nkrumah is in the struggle in the US. He comes to the UK. He is still part of the struggle. In fact, there is a professor at the University of Ghana. His name is, I think he passed recently, Professor Nketia, who said he had traveled to the UK to go and engage Nkrumah on the issue of Gold Coast independence. Nkrumah says if it's not West Africa, don't discuss it. So we understood Nkrumah's Pan-African interventions right from those days. So the invitation for him to come to this place, to come and help organize the UGCC, as at the time, was caught up in the politics of convenience, as we see today. The very people who enslaved and colonized us have become, all of a sudden, development partners. So it is the same politics that the UGCC was playing. Some of them were businessmen, some of them were lawyers who were friends with the colonialists. So they could not hit them, they could not kick them, they were concerned about their interest. They needed somebody to be able to do the dirty work for them. Nkrumah received the first invitation in his own account, that when he received the first invitation, he knew they were not serious. So he said he was not even going to come. Subsequently, when he decided to come, it was on the pretext that if he comes and they are not serious, he will have to find a way to break and be able to lead the struggle. So this was something that was right from the word go, part of him. It wasn't because Nkrumah got here and decided to betray anybody. He was clear where we had to go to be able to push this independence struggle forward. Often the narrative is that they prepared a political party, they were ready for independence, and Nkrumah came and then just backstabbed them, and then, no. So this is the account we need to be able to clarify for young people to be able to understand. That once we have decided that it is independence that we want, it is freedom that we want, it does not matter who is a big man, who is a big woman in there, who is trying to play politics and games with our destiny. We need to push them aside and move forward. It's the objective, the principle that matters. In the matter of strategy and tactics, they were prepared to play games. Nkrumah was not. They did not think that the youth and women and people of the land who bear the brunt of colonialism were to play any meaningful role in the struggle. Nkrumah's attack from the UGCC was primarily because he had involved young people who did not have anything. They called them the Flusam and Jesams, who didn't have anything. And so this struggle is about big people. Why are you bringing these riffraffs in their wet into the struggle? So Nkrumah comes in and opens the struggle up. This is what we need to do today. We're not going to have a few men in suit and tie who are going to free us in this continent. Majority of our people are sitting down waiting for some member of parliament, some politician somewhere to free us. If they would have freed us, we would have been free long time ago. In fact, they are mostly responsible for the mess that we find ourselves in. They're doing deals with the European Union, doing deals with all the other countries that are interested in keeping Africa where it is now. So Nkrumah comes in, opens the struggle up. Young people come in, women, farmers, teachers, ex-servicemen who themselves had gone to become mercenaries for the British Crown and had fought and their promises were not given to them, were all brought into the struggle. Often the nonsense you keep hearing is that the British left Nkrumah money. That is another thing we need to underscore. The British were so broke, they didn't have anything to give anybody. They did not leave anything for this because they came here to loot. For you to suggest that the British left us something means that you can't even reason. The objective of colonialism was to loot. Why would the looter leave you something? But today in Ghana, you have the political establishment talking about this nonsense. And so as long as we keep telling young people that we need the British, they left us something. It means that today, in the heat of neo-colonialism, we still need them to come and give us something to develop, whilst our resources are being siphoned every day out of the continent. So Nkrumah came and brought in the scope of the struggle for the ordinary man on the street to understand that he has a role to play in freeing up our people in our land. So that is where Nkrumah was key in turning the face of the struggle for independence, where the old folks had failed, as they are failing today. So that is the link that we need to be able to establish as Nkrumah's role in the struggle for independence in Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you, Abaji. I think that's a good link, a good lead-in in terms of the history of the independence struggle to today. We want to talk a little bit about the ideas of Nkrumah and its relevance for today. Again, many times it's made to perceive that this history is dead. History is unimportant. You just have to learn some facts and figures and some dates, some names, and that's all that's necessary. But you need to focus on today. Well, the reality is, as was stated in by our previous host, that history leads us to where we are. It forms the actual foundation from where we are starting. So I think one of the important things is I have a book here called Ghana, Autobiography of Kwame Nkrumah. It's one of almost 15 books that were written by Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. And it's a shame to me when we are learning about the history of Ghana or the history of Nkrumah that we seldom read his actual words, what he actually said and what he actually thought. We're usually reading other people's interpretation of him. And usually the people who are doing the interpreting are adversaries or disagree with him. So it's really not a fair opinion or a fair perspective of what his ideas were. So we have to be very careful. Again, we talk about primary source information, going back to the original words, the original writings, and those things are available to us. Sometimes we have to look a little bit harder, but they are available. And I think it's very important that we encourage everyone to go back to look at what he actually said about some of these things rather than taking someone's opinion about these different positions that he took. Again, relating back to the Independence Day speech that we started the show off with, or the poem about the Independence Day speech, and again, Abaji mentioned he calling on farmers and youth and women, and that they play an important role in thanking them in the independence struggle. They continue to play a critical role today. They generally bore the brunt of the suffering that we are facing today. Generally, it's the rural poor, the women, the children who are suffering more than anyone else in the society that many people are suffering in today. And so I think it's important that there's a connection here. There's a reason why he called on them to thank them for their role in the independence struggle. And today, they are still necessary, they're still needed to play a role in moving us forward in terms of development. So I'd like us to maybe talk briefly, if you would, talk about some of those, the way in which you see the role that youth, that women, that farmers, that workers can play in changing the society. Because again, as you said, we often think about this is something that's got to come from the academics, those who have been outside and been trained and are professionals in one way or another, rather than thinking about the ordinary everyday people that were actually in the lead in developing most of Africa, not just Ghana, but throughout the continent of Africa. Most of our independence struggles, the women played a key role in those struggles. The farmers, the workers played key roles in those struggles. So can we talk a little bit, or would you talk a little bit about how you see the role that those people those sectors of society can play in today's development?
Well, I mean, the very first thing that we need to understand is that the development narrative has to be returned to the people who are living it. In the way that we have been conditioned to live, what you have is a political and financial elite who are taking control of all of our resources, and you'll have this minority group who sit and they manage everything, and they basically tell you that this is how it's going to work and this is what works for you. Now, unfortunately, our education system has now led us to also believe this. We are sitting there believing that, you know, if I conform and if I sort of elect such and such a person, then they will represent my interests at every level. The fact of the matter is that we understand that the system is now so rotten that that is not the case. The people who are elected, even elected in good faith, are not necessarily representing the needs of the people. And this is because we are serving a neo-colonial system. Many of our leaders are here to represent their own interests and the interests of the neo-colonial powers. So essentially what is happening is that the people, the majority of the people who are the ones who are not only impacted by what is happening, but they are also the ones who are the owners of all the resources and all the all the wealth that we have as a continent are being ostracized, and they are being excluded from the development conversation. They are being excluded from the shaping of our development. The fact of the matter is, on this African continent, the youth make up the greater majority. This is something that we've been talking about a lot. But we are not creating, for example, an education system that gives them the tools that are required in order for them to be able to liberate themselves. That said, this does not mean that they do not know that they are oppressed. An oppressed person knows that they are oppressed. They know it on their plate, they know it in their home, they know it in the way that they are living, they know it when they sit in a space like an education system, or you sit in a classroom that is dilapidated, or you're sitting in a space that does not accommodate your needs, or you come out of a tertiary institution and don't have a job for 5 years. They know that the system is not serving them, but they have not been provided with all of the tools which are at their fingertips, but unfortunately not made easily accessible to them. They are the ones who should be defining the direction in which we go. As the Economic Fighters League, one of the things we are actually pushing for is proportional representation. They should be visible and present. The same thing goes for women. And this also goes across the board. We can't be sitting, for example, looking at an agricultural industry where we are forced to sort of sign European partnership agreements where the majority of your produce is being sent off, you know, and it's being sent off to Europe, it's being sent off to America, or wherever it goes, and it's being taken for the sort of the least possible value that they can place on it, right? And then sit there and think that what is coming out of that is going to develop you. So the role that we have to play is essentially in reclaiming the power where we have it. We don't necessarily always remember that. But the fact of the matter is, this is our land, and we actually have the access to the resources and to the spaces in which we can sort of determine that this is ours and we are not going beyond this. We have been betrayed by those who have been put in place to lead us. And so it is on us to find a way to sort of say, well, this is mine, and this is how we insist on moving forward. And it is in the little ways that you can. It is not necessarily by using very sort of confusing English or things like that. It's about, you know, it's about understanding that in the same way that neocolonialism permeates every single aspect of our existence at this moment in time, the liberation process is also in your house. The liberation process is also on your farm. It is also in your office. So it's also about we, in our ways, ensuring that that information and the resources required to make that happen are made available so that it is allowed to permeate every single corner of society. And then the people reclaim the power, and the people define the direction in which we are intended to move. And the people tell us what freedom looks like for us.
Thank you. And I think one of the, again, all of these things to me tie back to many of the things that Nkrumah talked about and wrote about over his entire adult life. And in terms of ability to impact those things for women, for youth, for the ordinary person, he talks about organization being critical. That until we come together in an organized fashion, we don't have the capacity or the power to make the changes that we need. And I know you're part of the Economic Fighters League, Obwaji, All-African People's Revolutionary Party, as two Pan-African organizations that are trying to organize people. Do you see, is that still a necessity, or is that as much of a necessity now as it was, say, during the independence struggle, during the early years of Ghana's independence?
Well, Osagyefo puts it best. He says organization decides everything. Indeed, this neo-colonial system would collapse tomorrow minus the involvement of the youth who have been organized to support it or mobilized to support it. That's very interesting. Majority of the people who are at the forefront of organization or mobilization of these parties, these neo-colonial parties we have in Ghana, for example, and across most of the continent, are young people. It is these young people whose energies are misdirected by a very exploitative system, making them work against themselves. That is entrenching this system. So the key to organization towards freedom is for us to be able to just go back to what Osagyefo said. And you would know that when he came, it wasn't about sitting in some fancy office and talking big English. It was going to the people because he knew that the decision had to come from the people. So when we go back to organization, when we decide to really get organized, understanding that without that, all that we talk will be hot air, nothing will come out of it. We need to be able to take organization back to the grassroots. All our women are mobilized into one church or the other. If you go and just watch on Ghanaian television, for example, the local TV stations, you have thousands of women, thousands of young men and women sitting in churches waiting for some miracle, some manna to fall. It is the energies of these young people and women that we must be able to organize to be able to free our land and our people. One of the things that we often talk about is the fact that if you seek freedom and you don't have the organizational mechanisms to be able to achieve it, then you can talk about freedom for a generation, for a century, and nothing happens. When Nkrumah came and took the struggle to them by organizing the various facets of society, you saw how Ghanaian women who had been inundated by the nonsense of colonialism, that their place was in the kitchen, that their hair was their glory, taking to the street and attacking the very colonial system. Young people who were kept on the fringes of life took to the street. Workers, in fact, my grandfather was a rail driver. He was a train driver. Now, at Esikado, in Sekendi, ordinary train drivers who could not speak all the English and all those things, decided to tell the British government that we are not going to pilot your trains if you don't leave this country. That is the background to the positive action issue. So in the whole of the country, you see that there is a positive action circle at Esikado. It is the organization Nkrumah brought to the railway workers. We call them the railway engine men. That, look, this is your land. You can't be just ferrying these resources to the colonial metropolis, whatever, for them to enrich their country, whilst our country is being made poor and our people are suffering. So he brought organization to the workers, and these workers decided, okay, fine. You cannot come and pilot these trains. We are taking these trains, taking bauxite, manganese, timber, and all those things to the port. We're not going to do it again. So see, by simply organizing the workers and making them understand their role in allowing their resources to feed their own development, they were able to declare positive action. And positive action breaks the back of the colonial economy. Because without the trains, how are you going to get all this wealth that you are stealing out of the country? So that is with the workers. Now, with women, you have a lot of women organizations. I met, of course, you met that woman when we were in Takrady in 2010, when we did the Pan-African African Liberation Day on the street at Amanfo in Takrady. There was an old lady who said that she was selling Atakwa when he heard Nkrumah speak. He said, no, this is what I want to hear. She put down what she was selling and said that whatever I'm selling will not be able to, because we've been selling all along. We need to go and follow this man. So they left whatever they were selling, went to follow Nkrumah. It's an example of what we can take whatever the people are doing today and put it within the organizational context. They will join. Their people are not lazy. They are not confused. We have not taken organization to them. If we take organization to them, just as they are supporting churches to make millions for individuals, the same way they can bring their energies to bear to be able to free our land so that the resources of the land will free us. That's very important.
Yes, thank you. It's very critical. It's a very good point. You made it very well. I think also we want to, this is Africa Global Radio, so I want us to tie in Nkrumah's internationalism and the fact that he wasn't just talking about the independence of Ghana. He was talking about all of Africa, in fact, all African people. And I know Africa Global Radio actually does go globally, so we're outside of the continent as Africa as well. So there's a relationship that Nkrumah certainly recognized during his life between Africans on the continent and those in the diaspora, and those in Ghana and those on the other parts of the continent of Africa. And he made mention of it even in his Independence Day speech. And I don't think, even though we've heard that many, many times about Africa's independence is meaningless unless it's linked with the total liberation of Africa, I'm not really sure if we understand fully what that means, because oftentimes you'll hear people critical because Ghana helped somebody else get independence, or Ghana assisted too much in the anti-apartheid movement, or Ghana assisted Guinea in their development efforts, etc. And I think if we understood that the essence of the linkage of the tie between Ghana and the rest of Africa, we wouldn't look at those things in the same way. Even now today, in the struggles that we find, we have Black Lives Matter movements taking place all over the world. I know there's an upcoming program talking about racism in Brazil, racism directed toward African people. All of these things, again, were addressed or thought of by Nkrumah in his vision of Pan-Africanism. So can you speak to your perception of the relationship of Africa to the oppression of African people globally?
Sure. Whenever I speak on this, I always start out by explaining my own lived experience. As I explained before, my roots are in Uganda. And I have lived in South Africa, I have lived in Zimbabwe, and now I live in Ghana. And across the board, the experiences, the lived experiences of the people are the same. And this is from the positive to the negative experiences. The external influences interrupting development are the same. The issues that we face are the same, but even down to like basic cultural things. When I came into Ghana, I struggled very easily because I felt like I was in Uganda. There's so much that is the same. Now, the reason I share that is because one thing that I find is, like if you look at the news at the moment, yesterday in the news we were looking at the protests that have broken out in Senegal. And then there's the fact that in Chad, the opposition leader's family has apparently been killed, right? And then you had what is happening in Uganda with Bobby Wine running against the dictator Museveni and facing the kinds of oppression that we haven't seen since Idi Amin. And you see all of these things happening across the continent, and you start to recognize that we're all fighting the same battle. There's a process of liberation that we all understand that needs to happen. There are the same forms of, this is again where we come back to the organization. In Senegal, the youth, the people are standing up and saying, we want for us to be able to declare this is how we move forward. The same thing is happening in Uganda, the same thing is happening all over the place. But at the moment where we stand, as fragmented as we are, we're fighting it in sort of separate corners. But at the same time, when you look carefully, you start to see that there's this amplification happening and a resonance that's being achieved when we speak to each other's issues. And it's a very beautiful thing. When you have people in Togo who are going under, who are dealing with a dictatorship under Nyasingbe, releasing statements in solidarity with the people in Uganda. When you have people in Ghana releasing statements in solidarity with a journalist in Zimbabwe. When you achieve that resonance, there's an amplification of our voices and a power that I think is unprecedented, or perhaps was last seen during the independence wave. Even if you look at the process of independence for the sub-Saharan Africa at least, 1957 triggered a wave of independences across the African continent. And so it is important to understand that, as Nkrumah said, in order to protect ourselves, we have to unite politically, so that we start to close those gaps where we can then be sort of invaded in one corner or the other. It doesn't matter how free Ghana is if Togo is not. Everything that happens, the geopolitics of it is all interlinked. And so once we gain that understanding and we start recognizing how the oppression in one space is exactly the same and actually has the same root as the oppression in another, then we start to understand the importance of uniting to resist that. For example, you look at the situation in Uganda where you have the French government, you have the American government, you have the EU, and all of these people funding Uganda's military. They call themselves development partners. Mm-hmm. They're funding the military. So while Ugandans are being tortured and murdered and abducted, it is happening under the auspices of Western governments. And so it becomes problematic then if we as Ugandans then start looking to the West for help to liberate ourselves, because those are the ones who are oppressing us. But if you look around on the African continent, there are others who have either gone through that process or it is ongoing and they understand the reality of it. And so it is necessary for us to actually look to those, to look into our mirrors and understand that this is where we find the solidarity and this is where we find the strength and this is where we pool resources in our own interest, because it is on the African continent and in her diaspora that you find those whose interest is the development of Africa and not something that is outward looking.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to need to wrap up, I think, this portion of our Independence Day programming. I know that the discussion will continue in the next program as well, as we talk about another part of the diaspora, and as mentioned, a very critically large part, the largest African population outside of Africa is actually in Brazil. And again, sometimes we don't think about those things. But obviously this discussion about Ghana's independence, the role of Nkrumah and the relevance of Nkrumah has to continue. It's very clear that there's much more to talk about and actually much more to do. I think I'd like to maybe sum up or conclude on a point that you made, that this can be a beautiful thing. You know, really, when we come together globally, internationally, in an organized way, it can be a very wonderful, fulfilling, satisfying, gratifying kind of thing. We need to see each other, seeing each other in each other's eyes, you know, recognize that, yes, you are indeed my brother, you are indeed my sister, we have experienced the same thing. So again, I encourage you, thank you for your contributions today and helping us to put some perspective on the African independence movement. I'd like to give you an opportunity to each make a concluding statement, very brief, as we can. Is that what I'm being told? Okay, I'm sorry. So again, we want to thank you for participating and for observing in this program. We have with us today Namata Saramaga Musisi from the Economic Fighters League, Kweku Obwaji Bwampong from All African People's Revolutionary Party, and myself, Albie Walls, Pan-Africanist here in Ghana, also in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Encourage you to take part in the ongoing work of Kwame Nkrumah, pursuing and developing Pan-Africanism wherever you are in the world as an African person is essential. Thank you very much.